Hello, what we're looking at today is the UKU instrument from Acoustic Samples, which is a UVI workstation virtual instrument. This instrument from Acoustic Samples will load either into the free UVI workstation, and I'm using this on a Mac, and I've got version 2.6.1, the 64-bit version on my Mac in Windows 9. It also loads into Falcon and is compatible with both. And it's essentially a ukulele, as the name might suggest in the picture on the screen. I think as a country, maybe as an entire species, we've become fascinated by ukuleles, and they seem to be appearing in every single pop song in the charts. So why not get your own ukulele? I'm not a great guitarist, as we've probably seen from previous videos that I've shown. I like to use virtual instruments. It's just more convenient for the writing process. And a ukulele is no exception, I'm afraid. I tried a ukulele. It's only got 4 strings, and I really made a complete mess of it. So a virtual ukulele is the place to go. And here is UVI Workstation's Acoustic Samples Ukulele. So what is this instrument? What's it for? Well, it's both it's got 3 real main tasks. It is a solo ukulele, and it's got some quite complicated scripting for doing hammer-ons and slides. It's a chord generator where you can strum up and down and program in your own chords and your own fingering styles. And that's just a manual chord player, so you can essentially tell it when to strum up and strum down and modulate that accordingly. And it's also a pattern player. It's got a built-in MIDI sequencer that will play individual strings, combinations of strings, up or down, mute, whatever, let them ring, and all sorts of clever things, and create tempo-synced loops, essentially MIDI loops, but then this program plays them on a single key. So it's actually a very accomplished player. The ukulele isn't a particularly complicated instrument, and this is only about 250 megabytes of samples, and it loads up in memory up to about 96 megabytes, and that's it. That's loaded and ready to play. You've probably seen some of the other virtual instruments that we use in this studio, certainly, that are over a gigabyte for a single instrument. This is a complete ukulele for 90-odd megabytes. So let's just look at the GUI very quickly, and I'll just run you through what we've got. Many of these controls you can see on the screen, they are switches, they switch up and down. Many of them are also controlled via key switches on the keyboard itself. Down at the bottom here, I've left the keyboard available to see. You can see there's some red zones. These are the play mode switches. There are some blue zones. There are some dark blue zones, a little yellow zone there, and some green zones. And depending on which play mode you're in, these different zones will change color. So if I go to the solo, there we go. They've all changed color. These are your key switches for different legato modes and string selections. And up here are the strings as well, and you've got mute buttons, and then these are your playable notes. In chord mode, which is the strummy chord mode, you've got the up and down strums up here at C4. The whole white area is the place where you can play your chords, and then you've got individual strings and some various different strum trigger modes, which are all on this sort of interface here. In the pattern player, it's a lot more simple. Each of these red buttons here corresponds to one of these keys up the top end, which represents a pattern. Patterns can be any number of bars long, and they can be linked to other patterns, so you can play them in sequence. You can also program using the song builder. You can program an entire song with verses, chorus, bridge, etc., and then switch between them automatically, which is quite clever. So that's what the pattern player does. So you play your chord down on the left-hand side in the white notes and select which pattern you're playing, and it just plays for you. And the last mode, which isn't that interesting to people like me, is the MIDI guitar mode, and that allows you to essentially use a MIDI guitar to play the 4 individual strings of the ukulele. And that's just quite clever if you've got a MIDI guitar. You can see here that the G string is MIDI channel 6, the C string is channel 5, the E string is channel 4, and the A string is channel 3. It's worth noting that the C, G, E, A is a standard tuning of a ukulele. You can't choose a different tuning on this instrument. So let's go to the solo mode and have a quick look. and a little listen to what it sounds like. So it's a solo ukulele. You've got 4 different legato modes. That's hammer, slide, legato, and off. It's got a preset distance you can choose here. It's normally set to 3. It makes it more sense. You can increase that anything up to an octave or down to 0 and beyond, which is fine. You've got a slide speed that slides between notes, and that's how long it takes to slide from note to note. And you've got the string selection, which is either auto or manual. You automatically choose which string is the best way of doing it, or you can select manually which string. And you've got the option to turn on and off palm mutes. And the graphic nicely shows you here the mute going in place. It's not a palm mute, it's actually a felt mute, but the sound is the same. It just tells you it's a bit of felt there. So what does this sound like? Well, it sounds pretty much like a sampled ukulele. There we are, ukulele. Sounds like a uke, plays like a uke. It's got some really nice legato hammers there. You can hear them going. Which does exactly what it says on the tin. If you choose slide, you can hear that. If I turn the slide speed right up, you can do slides, and that's really nice as well. And then you've got straight legato where it just plucks each string one by one. So the hammer would be the more representative of a standard playing mode, which is great. And it just plays, and it plays very prettily. That's pretty much the modes you've got there. If you look on the keyboard, you can see these green bits and this little yellow key. The little yellow key, if you press that one, that turns on and off the mutes, and the green switches switch between solo, chord, pattern, and MIDI guitar. So I'm not going to touch those green switches for the moment. Down the far end, at the other end here, you've got these blue notes. So we've got from the, what note is it going from? From this D. And these are just nice little wacky noises, quite literally somebody tapping the ukulele with their finger, which is nice for keeping rhythms. If you're playing little tunes, you can tap out a rhythm on there. And below there are these 3 yellow notes, and they temporarily, you can see as you press them, they temporarily switch the legato mode from hammer to slide to legato and to off. So you may be doing, and then you want to slide a note, you can just hit that F sharp, and you can slide the last, which is actually quite a nice way of doing it, having temporary articulations. I really do like it when instruments have temporary articulation switches, not permanent ones, so you can just go, right, I fancy a slide here, off you go. A lot of the string libraries really should have that between maybe legato and portamento, etc. So that's the solo mode. It's just a ukulele. It's polyphonic, but obviously you can only play 4 notes because there are only 4 strings. And it'll do the hammers between those. So that's the solo uke. Now, using the key switches, if I remember which ones they are, we can then go straight up to, here we go, chord mode. Chord mode, this is pretty cool actually, and I do like this. This follows the same articulation management system as the Sunbird guitar and all the other acoustic sample guitars, Dreadnought and stuff like that, which I also own and use because they're very handy. Sometimes you just want to strum yourself. Sometimes you just want to make things simple and you don't want all these complicated loops that sound repetitive. You want to add a little bit of feeling to it. And what these guys have done is C4 and D4 is a strum up and a strum down. But I'm not playing a chord, so it's just going to play random noises. These are just kind of plucky noises without any chord being selected. If I play a note with my left hand, let's say a G, by playing C4 and D4 in a strummy manner, you can strum your ukulele. It's actually really easy to play as well. You have to be fairly quick in hitting the keys in the right time, which is why I tend to quantize some of these sounds so they do fit in a lot better, or you can edit them manually once you've played them. If you just play a single note in the left hand and strum, it just plays a major chord. If you play a minor third, so the root note plus the minor third, you can strum your minors, and it's got a pretty complicated chord memory. If you focus down where it says chord F minor here, I've got C major, which is C big M, C minor, C suspended fourth, C suspended second. I've got C7, C major 7, and you can see as I'm doing all these various hitting notes, I've got what's that one? C fifth, C major add 9, C major add flat 9. So it knows all these chords and it just plays them, which is really quite clever. Something else that's very clever, underneath there you can see the voicing, and the voicing represents strings, where it's got voicing 1, for instance, is open string, that's cross cross, first fret, third fret. So a chord of let's go to F major. So F major here is second fret, open, first fret, open. Let's say you don't like that. Maybe you want it a little bit higher up on the fretboard here. Click on the little button and go down and go, well, there we are. There's 5, 5, 5, 3s. That's a little bit higher up. It's still F major, but it's moving up the frets. And if I go a bit higher, I can go to 5, 5, 5, 8. Here we are. And then if you're feeling very adventurous, you can go to 17, 17, 17, 15. And because you've got a whole load of keys to switch from, if I press this F major, for instance, that's 17, 17, 17, 17, and I can go to this F major and choose those, and now I can switch between them. So playing different Fs, I can choose the different ways of playing. So it's really handy. If you're just kind of strumming away and you're suddenly going, oh, hang on, that's jumped up a long way, you can go down and change the voicing of that particular chord that you're playing in your track. And work it through, which is really clever. If you're feeling, again, incredibly adventurous, and let's just say there's a strange chord that you're playing that isn't in the chord library, you can actually go into the editing tool here, and you can edit your own key switches, which is kind of cool. You can scroll up and if you click on this, how do we do this? I can't remember already. Here we are. You play a chord and you're playing the different notes, and you can edit it and move notes up and down. Here we are. So you can make up your own chords and assign them yourself, which is great. So you can make strange inversions should you really want to. I'm not going to apply that because I have no idea what I just changed. In fact, let's just see. It's all working again. Yeah. So if you just want to play chords and choose between majors and minors and strum away, all you need to do is play a chord with your left hand and strum with your right hand. And if you want to, you can use a sustain pedal to sustain. And it's got little squeaks, it's got little noises, and it's really quite convincing. So that's the basics. If you play a chord and don't want to strum, you can use the blue keys. And and you can arpeggiate, which is great. Beyond those blue keys are the dark blue keys, and just like before, the dark blue keys play funny little noises, and the yellow key, as before, here is the palm mutes. And the palm mutes play muted chords, which is lovely. Turn that off. So I love this engine. I really like the clean sound. And if you go down to the preferences window down the bottom, you've got a whole load of various playing styles. You can choose between fingers and pluck at the moment. And plectrum. At the moment we're on plectrum for chords. So let's switch to fingers and play that again. It's a little bit lighter and not quite so attacky, as it were. You've got the option between mono and stereo. You've got some reverberation that you can incorporate, so I can add a little bit of reverb to that. Which is nice. And you can change the velocity sensitivity, the velocity curve, the amount of fret noise release volume, and the pre-note volume as well, which is great. The pre-note is the noise of you placing your fingers on the frets. No noise, lots of noise. It adds to the realism, which is kind of nice. And you can change the IR distance, so the reflections. So turn off the preferences by clicking there. And that's chord mode. You've got other options up the top here. You've got guitar mode and piano mode. Guitar mode means that if you play a chord without strumming, you don't get a noise, you just get that placement noise, and then you have to strum. Let's just turn that reverb off, because that's a little bit too much. There we go. Piano mode means that when you press a chord with your left hand, it plays the chord. So you could actually use that chord as your first beat of the bar rhythm and then follow up with the strum keys. So you've got a choice. Guitar mode or piano mode doesn't make too much difference. It just means that if you want to suddenly finish on a chord, you can just press the keys and it'll play. You don't have to remember to press the strum key as well, which is great. You've got an accent control, which controls the accents. So just turn that down a bit. You've got the minimum amount of strings that it will strum. If you turn that down to 1, it only plays one note. Put it up to 3 or 4. It plays all 4. So you've got the option to play different strings. You've got the automatic and manual up and down trigger. Because I've got it in manual mode, I use C4 and D4. If I put it in auto mode, I just have to press one note. That was just using the one note. I like to do it manually because I like to be able to control up and down. You've then got the let ring option, which allows you to, as it says, let ring. So you play a chord, and it just sustains it ad infinitum until it fades out. I like to have that mute. As you lift it off, it mutes for you. You've got a strum speed option. If you turn it right down, it's very, very quick, and you can make it very slow, somewhere in between. It's quite a nice speed, gives you a bit of realism. But if your track's really fast, you may want to turn this down a little bit. There's the strum center, which chooses the place you're strumming on the keys. You've got hammers on the key chords, so actually let's go to guitar mode and show that better. Can you hear that? It's doing little hammer sounds if we get rid of that. Oops, turn that off. Go, turn off. It's gone. With the hammers, it actually gives you quite that nice feeling of you pulling your fingers off the keys, off the strings to go to your next chord, and again adds a little bit more realism. You've got the octave in which you're going to trigger, which in this case is C4, and there's our trigger point. And as you move this one down, it'll become down the bottom of the keyboard or up the top of the keyboard. It's up to you, have it where you like. You've got chord gliding as well, which is quite fun. And then there's mixed mode thing, which means that it acts like a piano, but also you can play single notes. So it's kind of a mixture between the chords and the solo. So there's your solo, and then hit a chord, it strums it. So that's actually quite a clever way of doing it as well. You have to remember that the solo only goes down as far as C2 because that's the lowest note of a uke. Below that, it plays chords. So you have to remember that when you're playing in to make sure you play in the right range. Over here, you've got your capo and transpose options. You can turn your capo on and transpose your uke up any number, there's a capo moving up, any number of frets. And the auto voicing I always leave on. It gets a bit complicated if you turn auto voicing off. It doesn't play as well, so leave that one on unless you want to play with it. And that is the chord player. Amazingly complicated, a lot of stuff to play with there, and you can get some really, really nice ukulele rhythms just from playing yourself. But if you're lazy and don't want to play yourself, or you just want to have a loop of uke going strum-de-strum-de-strum in the background of your track, you can use the pattern. So click onto patterns here. This octave now, the red octave from C4 up to C5, represents this octave here. And this is a series of patterns. There are 67 preset patterns within the interface. You can see some of them on the screen here. And each key corresponds to a different strum pattern. You can see I'm clicking on this button and it's saying this is pattern number 30, this one pattern number 32, this one pattern number 59, and you can program them in by dropping down and choosing the one you want. You've got the let ring option just like we had before, and the palm mute option, which is activated by the same note up here, which is nice. You've got a speed option, you've got a length option, you can choose how many bars each one is. It's incredibly sensitive, that one, so you have to really hit it with your numeric pad, not your mouse. You can link them together, which is great. And then you've got all sorts of parameters here where you can humanize average velocity level and then the deviation around that average, give it a little bit of a feel. And we'll play with that in a second. So what I'm going to do now is put the latch on so it continues to play. I'm not going to use the bar sync. The bar sync is quite clever. It listens to your DAW and it only starts strumming at the start of a bar. So if you've got a click going in the background, it's only going to start the strumming at the beginning of the bar, whereas if it's off, it'll start strumming whenever you hit the key, but it'll still sync to your host tempo. So a very handy little feature that if you just want to guarantee that your uke strums on the bar. Okay, so let's just choose a rhythm. I'm going to play a chord of C, and I'm going to play this first rhythm up the top here. So as I'm holding my keys down, it strums. Lift my keys off. Because I've latched it, it just plays open strings, which is quite nice. And then you can see here the parameters, average level, I can bring right down. Bring the deviation right down. And the humanization right down. And it's strumming everything at the same velocity. So if I bring it up, a little bit sterile there. Bring the deviation up. We've now got some variation, and if I humanize that, it adds some randomness to it all. And we can make it sound a bit more convincing, which is great. And we can shuffle it. And we're going to shuffle that one. and you hit the key again to cancel it. So that's kind of nice. If we turn off latch now, we don't have to worry about that. The octave, the 12 you've got here, are ample because you can edit them and assign different ones. And the 67 rhythms it gives you is overkill for a uke, but it's brilliant because you've got so many to choose from. And they all synchronize up really well. So I'm just going to play 3 or 4 of them in a row and just show you an example. I'm not going to go through all 67. That would take all day. So really very easy. I don't know what I was playing there. I had no click track, but I just played random chords and I played random rhythms, and some of them are arpeggiated, some of them were strummed, and some of them were other things. So if that's all you had, this would be an amazing instrument if you like ukuleles. But that's not all you've got. What you've also got is a complete strum editor. So here goes. Click on the editor button, and this brings up a completely new independent pattern that you haven't yet used. There's a completely empty pattern. You can see that it's 16 beats long, and here are the 16 beats, as it were. Each of those is an eighth, and if I press play, nothing happens because nothing's been strummed. But if I hit some of these notes, if I hit the first, fourth, there we are, and I press play now, it's strumming on the beat. Make sense? So I'm testing the pattern by using this little play button here. So I quite like that. I want it to mute after each one of these, so I click on the mute button. And now oh, sorry, not mute. I want to stop. Silly me. Mute only applies when you're playing strings. A stop is a... There we go. So already I've got quite a nice little straightforward 4-beat rhythm there. I can click on this string here and add a little bit of an upstroke. So these are down, 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 and down, 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 and down. Let's try that one. Bit loud. I like that, it's good. So that works. That's good to me. Nice, easy rhythm. And then you've got all these other bits in between. Of course, you can build up complicated strums. And while this middle chain is activated, anything you do to any string activates the whole string. So you click on the string and it makes a strum, drag the number, and the velocity goes down, push it up, the velocity goes up. If you just want to affect, and drag it all the way to the bottom and it disappears. If you just want to affect one string, you turn that link off, and you can put in one string. So I'm going to put a little arpeggio in there and then try that again. And there's that arpeggio. Make that nice and quiet. And let's just put a little bit of bass note just on the beats here as well, to add a bit more something to it. And you've made up a whole new rhythm. And it's really very clever by combining the stops, the mutes. So for instance, I might want to put a chaka chaka at the end there. There we go. So there's some mutes. Play again. And by turning up the humanization, can bring in some randomness. And when you're happy with that, you press save, and you can save it as something on your hard disk, or you can add it to your existing patterns, and I can call this JC and add that. Now if I go back out of my pattern builder, go to that note, I can go all the way down to the bottom to 68, and there's my one, assigned to C4. Brilliant. So it's a programmable ukulele with incredible power. Their string libraries, all of their guitar libraries are based on this same engine. So if you like the sound of this, or like the look of it and like the way it works, I do suggest you check out Acoustic Samples' other guitar libraries, because they are equally good and equally playable. But that's the UVI workstation Acoustic Samples UKU, which is a amazing little ukulele.